Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling probably one of the biggest questions there is. What actually happens when we die? Is it just lights out, the end?
Yeah.
Or, could it be something else, a door opening?
It's a massive question, isn't it?
Hmm.
Truly profound, and something humans have wondered about forever. So in this deep dive, our mission is really to unpack all these different angles you sent us, the science, philosophy, spiritual ideas, cultural views, to help you get a handle on what death might mean. We've dug through a really fascinating pile of material science reports, ancient writings, modern theories to pull out the key insights for you.
Okay, great. So let's start where our sources did, maybe with the most straightforward view. From a purely scientific standpoint, what is death?
Right. Well, biologically speaking, death is defined as the complete and irreversible stopping of all biological functions. Your heart stops beating, brain activity ends, your cells stop working, stop replicating. Basically, the physical organism ceases to function, and the body starts the process of decomposition, returning to the earth. It's a clear biological endpoint.
That makes sense. The biological how. Pretty final sounding. But like you said, the sources immediately ask, what about consciousness? Does that just stop too?
Exactly. And that throws us right into this huge philosophical puzzle, sometimes called the mind-body problem. It's a real mystery. Our sources kind of look out two main camps here. First, there's the materialist view. This says consciousness is basically just a product of the brain's complex activity. So, brain dies, consciousness vanishes, like switching off a computer. But then there's the non-materialist view. This suggests consciousness might be more fundamental, maybe something that isn't entirely dependent on the physical brain.
Okay, so if consciousness and the brain aren't necessarily the same thing, well, that opens up the possibility that consciousness could continue after the body dies, right? And this is where our sources got really interesting, dedicating a big chunk to near-death experiences, NDEs. We're talking thousands of reports, people clinically dead, then brought back. What kind of things do they commonly describe?
Yeah, the consistency is quite striking. People often report feeling like they're floating, maybe looking down at their own body. Many describe moving through a tunnel, often towards a bright light. Intense feelings of peace, overwhelming love, sometimes meeting relatives who've passed away or spiritual figures.
Wow. So how are these usually explained?
Well, there are two main takes. The sort of standard scientific explanation often dismisses them as hallucinations. The brain under extreme stress, maybe lack of oxygen, firing off randomly as it shuts down. But the alternative view, looking at the clarity and profound nature of these experiences, and especially those cases our sources highlighted, where people accurately reported events happening outside their room, things they couldn't have known while clinically dead. That makes some researchers think it might be more than just brain chemistry, maybe glimpses of something else.
That detail about verified observations, that really does challenge the hallucination idea, doesn't it? And this whole concept of something continuing, it feels very connected to how many spiritual traditions have viewed death for ages.
Absolutely. For many spiritual paths, death isn't an endpoint at all. It's more like a transition, a shift. You see it in Hinduism and Buddhism, for example, with the idea of reincarnation, the soul or consciousness being reborn into a new life, influenced by karma. Or in some indigenous traditions where the spirit continues its journey, maybe in another form or on a different plane of existence.
The sources you sent also mention some really intriguing cases, especially with young children, claiming to remember past lives, with verifiable details.
Yes, that research is fascinating. We looked at work like from the University of Virginia, documenting cases where children spontaneously talk about previous families, homes, even how they died. And sometimes these details are incredibly specific, things they couldn't possibly know, obscure names, descriptions of places or events long ago. Researchers then try to meticulously verify these claims against historical records or testimonies relating to a deceased person. When they find strong matches, well, it's hard to dismiss it as just coincidence or fantasy. If even some are genuine, it definitely supports the idea that consciousness might carry over.
That adds a whole other layer, doesn't it? But thinking more broadly, beyond reincarnation specifically, how do the world's major religions generally frame the afterlife? What's the common thread?
Well, what's striking is that despite huge differences in theology, the sources point out that almost all major religions offer some kind of narrative of continuity after death. Christianity, for instance, talks about the soul facing judgment, going to heaven or hell. Islam has similar concepts, often with very vivid descriptions. Judaism has varied beliefs, but many include an afterlife or eventual resurrection. And then you have traditions like Taoism or Shinto, which might emphasize the ongoing connection with ancestors and spirits. So the core function seems to be offering comfort, providing a moral framework and reinforcing this deep human intuition that death is a passage, a transformation, not just annihilation.
That need for continuity seems really fundamental. Okay, let's shift gears quite dramatically now. Our sources also touched on a very modern, very speculative idea about reality itself, the simulation hypothesis.
Ah, yes, the simulation theory. It's definitely out there, but it's an idea some physicists, philosophers, and tech thinkers are actually discussing seriously. The basic concept is, what if our entire perceived reality is actually a highly sophisticated computer simulation created by some more advanced intelligence?
Okay. So, if that were true, what would death mean in that context?
Well, in that framework, death might just be like logging out of this particular simulation, or maybe finishing a level. The player, which would be our fundamental consciousness, might simply continue to exist outside the simulation, or perhaps even load into a different one. It completely reframes the concept of an end.
It's wild to think about. Hugely speculative, obviously, but it definitely challenges traditional ideas of death, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, philosophers have been wrestling with death's meaning for centuries, long before computers. Our sources touched on some key philosophical viewpoints, too, like the existentialists Sartre, Camus. For them, the very finality of death is what gives life meaning. It forces us to choose to create value in the limited time we have.
That's one way to look at it. What about others?
Then you have the Stoics, who argue that death is natural, inevitable. So fearing it is irrational. It's part of nature's cycle, just accept it. And way back you had thinkers like Plato arguing the soul is immortal, separate from the body, and continues on. So philosophically, whether you see death as an end or a beginning might really depend on your whole worldview, how you choose to live now.
It really spans the whole spectrum of thought. Okay, venturing back into science, but maybe the more speculative side, what cutting-edge ideas are trying to bridge that gap between, hard science and this enduring mystery?
Right, there are definitely some fascinating, though still very theoretical ideas emerging. One is related to quantum mechanics. Some researchers, like Hameroff and Penrose, propose this idea of quantum consciousness. They suggest consciousness might arise from quantum processes inside brain cells. And speculatively, these quantum effects might not entirely cease with biological death. Maybe the information persists or dissipates into the universe somehow.
Quantum information. Interesting. Any others?
Another big one is the multiverse theory. If there are potentially infinite parallel universes, as some cosmological models suggest, then even if this version of you dies in this universe, countless other versions might continue existing in others. Death here isn't the ultimate end for you in the grander cosmic scheme. Again, highly theoretical, but it shows scientists are grappling with these questions using their most advanced tools and concepts.
It's mind-bending stuff. But beyond all the theories, spiritual or scientific, our sources also really emphasize the very human, emotional side of death.
Yes, and that's incredibly important. We humans seem hardwired to find meaning in the face of death. It's a profound psychological need. Think about grief. It often leads people to look for signs, for connections, for reassurance that their loved ones aren't just gone. And there's this powerful idea of legacy, how we live on through our actions, our children, the memories we create in others. It's kind of symbolic immortality. We continue through stories, through impact, through descendants. So even without a literal afterlife, death can absolutely spark new beginnings and meaning in the lives of those who remain.
And that connects to those personal experiences you mentioned earlier, right? Millions of people report things like strange coincidences, vivid dreams, a feeling of presence after someone dies.
Exactly. And while, mainstream science might often explain these away as grief responses or wishful thinking, for the person having the experience, the emotional reality is undeniable. It can be incredibly powerful, even life-changing. Death fundamentally transforms relationships. It doesn't always end them. Our sources showed how loss can sometimes lead to profound spiritual awakenings, or even someone completely redirecting their life's purpose. The human heart finds ways to maintain connection.
So after exploring all of this, the biology, the NDEs, reincarnation, religion, philosophy, even quantum physics and simulation theory, where does that leave us? Is death the end, or is it a new beginning?
Well, I think the most honest answer, gathering everything from our sources, is we don't definitively know. Not for sure. But maybe, just maybe, that uncertainty is the whole point. The mystery itself pushes us. It invites us to ask those deeper questions about life, about meaning, about connection, to maybe appreciate the life we do have more intensely.
Yeah, it seems this whole deep dive shows that death isn't just about an ending. It's this profound mystery that challenges us to live better, maybe love more, and always seek understanding beyond just what we can see and touch.
Exactly. Whether it's the final curtain or the start of Act Two.
Yeah.
Perhaps death is ultimately life's greatest teacher. It constantly reminds us to consider what it truly means to be alive.